Another big topic for the day, CBS News has confirmed the White House will soon roll out its revised travel ban. President Trump is expected to leave Iraq off the list of targeted countries.
The new executive order will keep a 90-day ban on travel to the U.S. from citizens from 6 Muslim-majority nations, including Iran, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Sudan. CBS Radio News White House correspondent Steve Portnoy is now with us on the phone. Steve, what more can you tell us about this revised rollout of the executive order banning travel from these certain countries?
Well, we expect, Tony, later today there'll be an event here in Washington. The heads of the Departments of Homeland Security and Justice and State will collectively unveil this new executive order that the president has signed. You know, it's been nearly a month since the Ninth Circuit Appeals Court prevented Mr. Trump's first travel ban from going back into effect. It was a 3-judge panel that had issues with the original order's impact on green card holders and visa holders. It signaled that the concerns of opponents that it was essentially a dressed-up Muslim ban could, in the end, carry the day in court. This new order is tailored to deal with most of the court's concerns. It will have specific carve-outs for those with green cards, those with valid visas. A White House official tells us it won't go into effect for another 10 more days, March 16th, and that will allow for what is intended to be a more orderly implementation. They say that they do not want to see the kind of chaos that we saw at the end of the president's first week in office, in which this order was hastily signed and then implemented across the country, and we saw protests at airports and mass confusion with Customs and Border Protection. The intent is to have this be a much more orderly process. But key points, the current visa holders would be exempt from the new restrictions. Iraq would be removed from the list. There would be still 6 Muslim-majority countries affected. This is different from the previous order that banned visitors from 7 majority Muslim countries, all the ones you see on the screen, plus Iraq. This takes Iraq off the table. The question is why? Well, officials say that, for a couple of things. One is officials were pressured by the Pentagon to not dishonor those Iraqis who helped the United States take on Saddam, and then al-Qaeda, and then ISIS. So Iraq comes off the table. There's also an indication that perhaps the Iraqis have in some way stepped up their ability to provide the American officials with some degree of information as to who these people are who are getting visas to come here.
You mentioned that the intent is to have a much more orderly rollout than the last time around, which I don't think it would take much to improve on the last rollout. But other than clarifying this order, what's being done to ensure a smoother rollout?
It's a really good question, Anne-Marie, and hopefully we'll learn more to get an answer to that later today. But what seems to be the case is this looks like it's a ban on new visas being issued. If you have a green card, if you have a visa already, then you shouldn't have a problem coming to the United States. But what seems to be the case going forward is the United States will, for a period of time, no longer issue visas to residents or national citizens of the 6 countries that are affected. One key change is that Iraq comes off the list. Basically, the way of thinking here at the White House remains exactly what it was 2 months ago, which is that the president has this authority under law to decide that certain classes of immigrants are not in the national interest, and that he has this power that you've heard officials here say cannot be questioned, that to decide that there's a reason or a rationale to institute this kind of ban. This will not quiet the legal challenges. In fact, the ACLU is already preparing its army of lawyers to come up with some kind of response to this new travel ban. So this will surely wind up in court, but it's important to understand that the White House's perspective on this is that it's more narrowly tailored to address the concerns expressed so far in the court.
Steve, you mentioned that it is more narrowly tailored to address the legal concerns. However, there's also a political side of this, and it remains true, as far as I know, that these 7 countries that are likely to be on the new revised list of temporarily blocked nations, they are not nations that have produced terrorists that have attacked us since 9/11 or including 9/11. So is there a need politically or potentially legally to justify this on national security grounds by pointing to an actual threat?
Another good question, Tony, and the fact that, it's been nearly a month since this ban was prevented from going back into effect, and, if it wasn't such an immediate crisis, why would the administration wait so long? That's a question we've been asking over the last 4 weeks. Finally, the administration's ready to move forward with this. Perhaps they'll have a greater rationale for why it is that these particular countries should remain on the banned list. You'll remember when they instituted it in the first place in late January, they argued that these were countries identified by the Obama administration as countries with repeated lax scrutiny of terrorists or some kind of tie in the past. But you're absolutely right, Tony. There's not exactly a link you can point to between these countries and individual lethal terrorist acts in this country. Now, the Trump administration would dispute it. They'd say that there are examples of attempts at terrorism, both here in this country and overseas, that were not necessarily successful, but emblematic of at least some kind of evil intent on the part of people who have come from those countries. But the questions remain, and also you will see opponents of this say that it's still based on the animus toward Muslims expressed by the president over the course of the campaign, and the case will proceed, I'm sure, on that basis. The Trump administration is expected to argue that the cases that have been entered into court to this point are going to now be moot. That is, should be disregarded by the courts because this new order supersedes the old one, and therefore a whole new round of legal challenges would have to be entered.
Yeah, indeed. You mentioned the Muslim ban. As a candidate, he put out a statement, you can still find it online, calling for an immediate halt to all Muslim immigration into the United States. And now here we have 6 countries, Muslim majority. It's a political question. It's a legal question going forward. And in between, canvassing both, we have our own Stephen Portnoy, CBS News Radio, White House correspondent. Steve, thank you.
You bet.